Good morning, wherever you are. I am delighted to have you here. And in this festive season, I am really delighted to welcome our guest, Okpokwasili, one of the most interesting, original, and formidable artists working today. Now, you will remember that the overarching theme of Skirball Tapes is radical imaginations and indelible acts. Not only what is going on in the soul and the mind, but what is going on in our world. Now, the protocol is I will have the privilege of a conversation with Okwui until about 11:45, and then we'll have questions. And please put your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. And I wish to apologize if on the Zoom you occasionally hear the sounds of construction. I'm in a New York City apartment, and the sounds of construction often follow us. So here we go with the extraordinary Okwui. But thank you so much for doing this. Now, you and I probably have different memories of the night of November 29th of this year, because I went out to Brooklyn where you were performing. And when I walked into the theater, you were already on stage with 6 other women, and your bodies were in this intense circular motion. George, can we see two visuals, not from the Brooklyn performance, but from other performances of this work in progress called a Daku, Part 1, The Road Opens. So, and George, can you show us a second, please? Okwui, what was I seeing? You
So,
enthralled me. You
uh,
drew me in. What was I seeing with this body of women so clearly attuned to each other?
so what you were seeing in that, so it's interesting because those images come from previous performances, and I
Right.
think the performance at BAM in Brooklyn um, had us, I think, even more tightly intertwined, even more of a kind of in a sort of cellular uh, composition, recombining, decombining. And it's interesting to see those still images because it actually feels quite quiet when in fact there's breath and there's a particular step and pulse that we're keeping. The person in the front may move through the circle and go to the end. There might be shifts in direction, people are moving backwards, forwards, but all of us tightly bound together. And I think so for me, one of the things growing up as a Nigerian Igbo American and going to various functions, especially weddings, there's always a period where um, women come out, and sometimes they come out with the bride, and they are moving and they're dancing together. They have a dance and a multi generational cohort, and it's always been so fascinating to me that they, you know, it is a tradition, but it's always felt to me like, how do these women um, just continue to know these dances, practice these dances, and how are they so beautiful together? I mean, they seem at such ease. And so, in some way, I'm hearkening back to this thing that I understand, but also in pre-colonial Igbo societies, there were collectives of women, wives of the town, daughters of the town, that would come together and advocate for each other, advocate for the needs of members of their particular cohorts. And so these groups of women were really important social kind of anchors in the community, making sure that women were taken care of, needs were addressed. If anybody was hurting, there was some place to go um, to be heard. So the collective of women that I saw at these dances, at these weddings, um, was not just about marking a particular kind of movement skill, right? But it was a mark of a particular social construct that said that these women can be together and support each other, and there's a tradition of support and care, that that this dance seemed that I think that dance was emblematic of. So in the space of a daku, I really wanted to think about that core of women, starting to, not only are they support for each other, but they are somehow a really central node of holding a community together. Yes, we hold our community together. We're going to hold you together as an audience. This is going to hold the story together. But it is also, that movement is happening while there is a song that is, eventually a song starts.
Oh, but the
That is
song.
the song, a song starts, right? That is a song that is sort of my imagination of what a carver, what the skills of a carver might be. Let's say like the metaphysical skills of a carver, right? To open the road to the ancestral plane, from the living plane. And so, it becomes, so it moves, of course, the this movement of this circle of women continues for, we would say, roughly 30 to 35 minutes, right? So
But
it's
it is
moving through,
yeah,
say it
it's
again.
mesmerizing. So,
So it's moving through all of these planes, right? As something that marks a particular position of women and the power of their organizations, historically in that community, but then also as the space of opening up and thinking about how would we reach sort of the knowledge of the ancestors? How would we hold on to that knowledge as we move forward and look towards the future? And so it's doing all of that, and the incredible group of women who were in this piece, who all have their own singular creative artistic practices. They give so much to this ongoing engine, hold this, to sustaining this engine. And then of course Samita Sinha, who a beautiful artist who I have worked with in her own work. The last piece was called Tremor. It was just a dance space project, and it will be at the University of Chicago. But she has a practice that, she was trained in classical Hindustani singing, and then began to train in bal singing, which is a a southern folk tradition in India. And she has been working with, really thinking about formal practices, but molecularizing them, trying to get to the deep root and engine of them. But so in our context, there was space in that song that opened up her kind of vibrational sonic practice, which then started to recall, oh, there was this exchange and trade actually across the Indian Ocean from Asia into Africa. So we were really trying to open up all of these, in that song and in that
yes, yes.
movement. I'll open up all of these roads, open up the possibility of a memory of all of these roads. and
Well,
and
I
so I'm
wondered
sorry, I'm
about
going
that.
on.
No, because the piece, and I hope our audience can see it at one point or another, because you have to keep performing it if you don't mind the repetition. Um, it's the density of it. And
Yeah.
when it was over, the audience had so many different interpretations, which I took as a tribute to the power of the piece. But you're known for your collaborative work. And right now, you have given us an example of your collaborative work with praise for your fellow artists. The women who were dancing, by the way, was the pulse of that dance 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4?
it was boom, dun, dun, dun. It was like boom. It was a kind of a drop, Yes, it was in fours because we had had an incredible residency at MoMA where it was a three thing, but then we made it four, and it was like, should we have done that? But that's we didn't mean to. Yeah, this is maybe that was a little too easy for us.
No, but are you trying to recreate in your collaborative art practice to recreate what pre-colonial Igbo society was like, with its sense of the power of women? And so you can recreate with your husband, with your collaborators, with your staff, and you credit everybody who works with you. That sense of unity, that if it was broken by colonialism, perhaps you can bring back a repetition of it in
Right,
modern.
Catherine. It's so beautiful that you say that because I do think that there is this desire to, in some way, reestablish a link to some past that feels pretty disappeared, right? Because my parents also grew up, they went to missionary schools, right? There are parts of um, a pre-colonial culture that they are not aware of, and that even within certain strata of Igbo society, to look to that space and to in any way hold that space up as something to remember, might be considered quite, heathen, and
Oh,
it's
oh,
not
wicked,
some,
wicked.
yes, kind of wicked, and it's not something that, uh, at least in my family, that it has been held up. And I remember I have a close friend of my dad's, a beautiful man who passed away maybe about 5 years ago. He had actually been he was a professor at the University of Michigan and had been educated here in the United States, but went back to Nigeria and was living in Nigeria and practicing, at least sort of thinking, he had a garden and he was thinking about pre-colonial medicinal practices. But people looked at him like he was a little bit crazy, and considered him somebody who, in some way had let himself go. But I think so. In answer to your question, if I could, um, I feel that it's impossible for me to to I mean, I'm not a documentarian, obviously. I'm not a historian. Love history and love to research and get the and find those gems to for inspiration. But it's a personal desire for me to find a kind of, it's a personal, maybe reparation, a reparative desire,
Well, yes,
a
yes,
way
yes, I
to
see
have,
what you mean.
right, a way to repair something, while knowing that it is not the thing and it can't be the thing, and knowing that it is a kind of a speculation of my own mind and a kind of a reimagining. And so so yes, I'm looking to those practices, and in that research, trying to find inspiration for what I feel are sort of proto-feminist practices, um, even, democratic. I mean, pre-colonial Igbo culture was wildly democratic, so democratic that when the English were trying to impose indirect rule, they actually called it female and chaotic, because their process of indirect rule demanded that they find some kind of head, a hierarchy through which to project power. But they needed a figure that they could impose those rules and laws through, that people in the communities would listen to. And in Igbo society, it was so hard to find that, because there wasn't one person who could sort of hand down edicts to the entire society and have everybody follow it, because that's not how it operated. Everyone had a say. And so there's a way in which I look to that, with hope, with just a way of thinking. And it's also a way to try to think about the future, in fact, right?
Exactly.
Instead of, it's almost less about that past than continuing to imagine a future, and continuing to fuel how I work, how I want to work, the world that I want to build, the world I want my child to live in, the world I want all children to live in.
This is your
um,
12-year-old somewhat mischievous
Yes,
daughter.
my 12-year-old, very mischievous daughter. But
But
I
what
wouldn't have it any other way. All little girls should be somewhat mischievous.
children should be mischievous.
As
They
they should
really
be.
should have, they should have a little
Yes.
mischief in them. But one thing that was, now that I first met your performances in 2017, and one thing you do is to draw your audience in
And
as a
sometimes push
part
them
of
out,
you
Catherine.
and push them out. Well,
Sometimes they can't handle it. You like it.
I love it. I respect it. And if they can't handle it, yes, you're challenging because you walk in and then you're being asked to enter into a world that's already in formation.
Which is how
And
we enter the world.
exactly, exactly. I was not born into a blank space, for better or worse. But you say something. The string of words here, I think, is emblematic of you. The way in which you embrace contradictions. You said, in the best circumstances, an enveloping, intangible skin winds around both performer and audience, ensnaring, mesmerizing, appalling, and enlivening. And then you say, with a bit of mischief, that you women are a little bit like a witch's coven. But are you hoping, at best, not to indoctrinate your audience, but through drawing us in to imprint on us possibilities of the past and possibilities for the future? Do you want us to take within the skin of collaborating with you? Do you want us to have something imprinted on us of possibilities, past and future?
I mean,
Can
yes.
I see you not only as a wonderful witch, but as a prophet?
Ah, I don't know about that. I don't know about the prophet part, and I wish I could be a witch. Can I just tell you that a friend of mine was hanging out with my daughter, and my daughter said, obviously witches, the way witches were stereotyped, it was wrong. They weren't bad. They just had, they had knowledge of the earth, of herbs. They could heal, and I think she said, she said maybe people were afraid of them. So my daughter is also a budding witch. Of course, I wish. Um, I mean, I'm merely an artist, and I'm jumping off from my imagination. Uh, like I find what's here in the world, and I have and then I just take off into a trajectory that you know is not as solid as witchcraft. But I do feel like there is something so special. I feel it um, about being in a room with folks. Um, and we know, like, post COVID, the isolation was really for some devastating. But I also want to suggest that post COVID, we get the chance to have this conversation in the digital space and make another kind of community. But there is something so special about the vibration of bodies together, the energetic exchange of bodies in a room. And I
No.
think that there is some magic to it. And I think that as a person who does live performance, um, and working also with my incredible husband, who is such, the way he designs all of the spaces that we're in. I mean, he designs a space, and I am inspired to understand something about um, how we are going to breathe together in it. So yes, I think imprinting happens. I mean, it happens on a subway, right? When you're in a
And
packed subway car, there is a kind of energetic response going through the space. I mean, and maybe sometimes there are people on ear pods and they can't necessarily, they're not always aware of it. But um, I think there is something that is irresistible And what I do hope to do is that if there is again that path, that opening to the awareness of this, of our energetic exchange in the space together, is it possible that there is an empathetic response? Is it possible that um, that awareness of your own body next to others makes you also think about others? Like, this is happening to me, what is happening to them? This is, you know what I mean? I don't you know, and obviously we have to be very mindful of not also projecting our own interior experience onto others. But what is the space? I'm hoping to make a space that suggests, wow, I'm having, this is my interior experience. Is it the same? Is it different? Like, or it you know, it's shifting and changing. How But that's only one layer, right? Because experience is sound, it's sight, it's the heat or the cold in the room. So I'm hoping on some level there is the constant, you're in a kind of wave of vibration that sometimes makes you feel like I'm with, oh, I'm alone, I'm with again. I want, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I
I
want.
know.
And yeah.
And I'm so intrigued by your musical metaphors, attuned, vibration, as if we're a part of a world of sound, some of which we hear, some of which we don't. By the way, I want to thank you again because I know your house is no heat.
I know.
I thank you for sitting in a room that you come from the land of the sun.
But I was born here in New York, but I still want sun.
Yes, the Bronx,
Yes.
1972. But just I want to do one more thing with Akadu, because I think you're going to go back to this. You've written about Akadu, which means, doesn't it mean beautiful child, child of God,
Wait,
daughter
which,
who
say that
will
again.
bring?
Say that
Doesn't
again.
doesn't Adaku mean
Adaku, child of wealth.
yes, and the daughter
Yes.
who will bring
Daughter,
bounties?
it's the first and the first daughter, because Ada in Igbo culture, I'm an Ada. You know, that the Ada, the first daughter, is the one who is also supposed to hold the family together as everybody disperses, right? They're the ones who are, I mean, they might have their own families, but they're really tasked with, uh, you know, making sure everybody, you know, everyone is taken care of. I'm an Adanya, and that means my father's first daughter, but Adaku is the first daughter of the family of wealth. You know, Adeze, the first daughter of the king. There are so many Adas. Yeah.
Beautiful. But the performance I saw, part on the road, part one, doesn't it end, at least as I saw it, it ends in sorrow and with a mourning song. And you focus on three women, don't you? And the older women that you play, clearly the matriarch, the older daughter, and you have some wild speeches about, I've left my marriage, I want a wife.
Right. So there's a tradition where in certain Igbo culture, and like Igbo obviously is a big, covers many, some, a big region. And so there are shifts in different parts of that culture, but there is a pre-colonial tradition where a woman could be made a son, and then marry, and then have wives, marry and have children that are, you know, that she holds, and that then she can bestow land to. Yes.
but you
And
but you end with a mourning song, you end with a
yes.
death. And is it
Or a loss. It's
yes,
not clear.
right. But it ends with the sense of you bring down a wall, the walls are falling.
The mylar curtain.
Yes.
But it sounds like an ocean, doesn't it? It sounded like an ocean. I'm giving it away. But please, I'm sorry, Catherine.
No, no, it may have sounded like an ocean to some. To me, it just sounded like breakage. And it could be the waves eroding the rock, or it could be trees falling, but it sounded like breakage. But I'm glad that there are going to be many other parts. But one thing, and clearly what the road might bring might not be joy, happiness, and carousels. I was fascinated by the vectors in your life that brought me to Brooklyn on November 29th, 2023. And you said you were born in the Bronx. Your parents were exiles or immigrants?
Immigrants,
Yeah,
immigrants. But they didn't go back because of the Biafran War.
right.
So my dad went here and went to college here. There was a program in the 60s developed, I think it was during the Kennedy administration, especially at the height or the sort of onset of the Cold War, and at the height of the like burgeoning pre-colonial post-colonial struggles in different African countries, where I think the U.S. wanted to make sure that they were educating a particular crop of future leaders to think about democracy, capitalism, and I think in a direct response against socialist movements. And so my dad came here, I think, as part of that particular effort on the in the U.S.
You grew up in what your mother once said, and this may have been a mother's truth, and I think you alluded to it earlier, that she saw a documentary movie of Bronx Gothic, where I first saw you. And she said, I think her style of movement is like Nigerian dance. So your mother saw you evoking the dances that you saw as a child, the
But I
social
think
of your home.
but Catherine, I think she also said, but we have more joy in it. That she has more, you know, hers are a little, yes, maybe there's something about it, but it doesn't have, it's not concerned with the rhythm, and also doesn't have the joy, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if she said that in the movie, but she has said that to me. I think I don't know. I think um because she was like, oh, it scares me what you do.
Well,
I get worried about you. And my father's like, yes, I worry too. You know, they did come to this adaku and they enjoyed it, and they did not tell me that they didn't see joy in the dance. But I think, I think that there is a sense of, they're just like, can't people rest, and that's another thing when I think about the groups of the collectives of women who dance. Sometimes there are collectives of men who also dance, but the women, they always seem to be very relaxed, very at ease. They're doing the step. They know they're being watched. They are very. It is very. Seems very effortless, particularly in these social settings, and it is. It is just it is joy, but it's also joy of being looked at. They're dressed in their finery and the lace and and it's just, and also, you don't want to muss yourself. You have a very elaborate lace, very elaborate, it's not lace, I can't remember, it's a very stiff material that is shaped into incredible geometric patterns that are pinned together. So in some ways, when you're doing these things, you don't want to disrupt the entire this entire kind of incredible artistic masterpiece that you have become for this event.
but
Um,
isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that you were you went to Yale and you were working with, but what is it fair to say that perhaps because of the documentary, it was Bronx Gothic that brought you to, oh my heavens, it's
yes,
it's Okwui. But I would love, just because it seems to me one thing you're doing in Bronx Gothic, which I saw in 2017. I walked in and you were using your body both as agony and finery. And George, could we please see quickly the image of what you saw if you were walking to a performance of Bronx Gothic? And you held your audience. Thank you, George. That's terrific. You held your audience for maybe 15 minutes. We looked at the body.
It was 30
as
minutes.
thir-
So it was
you see,
50.
you're so good. I thought it was 15.
No, 15 minutes is when people could walk in. So it was happening as people were moving in and settling down. Because I like to give people a chance to, you don't have to be where I am immediately, but eventually you will reach this space. So I always give that time. And then I think once people really settled, it was another 15 minutes of having to watch. Yeah.
Not having to watch,
Uh,
wanting to watch. Okay, wanting to watch. But you said of this, what it was a Bronx girlhood, and you said you were bringing together the African tradition of storytelling, the griot, and Victorian novels, and that your
yes.
body was doing a movement called quake,
Yes.
fear, earthquake. What did you mean, Victorian novels and the
Well,
griot? How? I mean, your mind is so capacious.
it's
Which
it's just
Victorian
it's
novels
just
did you have in mind as
so
you saw this
I was thinking
kind of a
about
thought?
I was thinking about the Gothic novel, right?
Yeah.
And particularly thinking about even Bram Stoker's Dracula and the advent of those novels around the height of the colonial project from Europe to Africa, right? And and a component of these novels is a fear of infection, a fear of being overwhelmed by a kind of invisible presence, a fear of infected blood, a kind of undercurrent of desire, not only a fear of a thing, but also a kind of attraction, being compelled towards that thing, and so I was thinking about that. But then in griot traditions, I had been thinking about what it is that people want to have remembered about them, right? They might, if wealthy families may pay a griot, especially during wedding ceremonies, to talk to sing of the family, to sing of the legacy of the family. And sometimes maybe the griot might start to sing something that is not necessarily what the family wants remembered. So I was just really thinking about, like, who controls what narrative, what are the things that are going to be remembered. And in Bronx Gothic, my character brings people into what looks like a boudoir, a bedroom, some secret shared space, to maybe tell a story and speak of something that should not be spoken of out loud, or she would be she's come to a place where she is compelled to tell. um but also there is the story of, like, the coming of age, a kind of sexual
Yeah.
awakening, and a sense of something happening in her body, something in her, coming towards her, both outside and in, that she can't quite understand, or that she can't quite understand, but it's coming and it's taking over. So those are all of so that's those are those that's how those threads. And also, just thinking of even the strategy in certain Gothic novels of the letter writing, and so Bronx Gothic does unfold, particularly in the first part, as a series of letters or notes between the girls. So that was another
So it was
a
very
trope that I took.
much leading us into what we don't know and maybe fear to know, but must know. You have said what you didn't, you learned is from one of the most important 21st century novelists, Achebe, and this was the novel, Things Fall Apart. George, could we just see the cover of this?
Yeah, that blew my, like, that's what happened to me when I read that.
Yeah, there are many, by the way, as our audience knows, there are many different covers of Things Fall Apart.
This
And
might be
as
the
our
best one.
audience knows, the title comes from a Yeats poem that ends with, "What rough beast is slouching around to Bethlehem to be born?" Thank you, George. That's great. What did you saw how this novel, in a sense, tore your imagination apart and recreated it? What happened when you read this?
I mean, I must have been 15, 16, and I
You were
had no idea that there was a pre-colonial space within Nigeria. I just didn't know. My parents had never told me.
It's
I
okay.
did not know. That's what I mean. It was,
Yes,
and my family, Chinua Achebe, is from the area that my family grew up in. So our
this is so.
families know each other, and I think that there's something about um, maybe it's specifically Igbo culture, Igbo immigrants having immigrated in the late 60s, early 70s, suffering also from the Biafran War. I mean, we had a lot of family, and that the region where my parents are from was devastated and maybe still not recovered
Oh,
after
it was
that
a terrible
war.
war.
And
Just to
so,
remind our audience of
sorry.
1967 to 1970. And terrible, yeah.
So I think when I around the time I was born, there were a lot of people who were one sort of contending with what to do about home. Do we go back? How do we deal with that? We're here in this country trying to build something that is going to allow us to go home, recover, take care, and then there were a series of coups um, that impacted the ability to try to rebuild, particularly the southeast region after the war, and so and also to be in this country and for the first time for some of them to become black, to have to deal with sort of the violence of white supremacy, where they had, where there is a colonial violence, of course, that they experienced, but maybe some of it just of a different stripe. So I'm just trying to suggest that I think my parents and many parents were so concerned with making sure that the children that they had here um, were very very cared for, educated. The Bronx was really complicated. My parents were going to school, still going to school and getting degrees and working full time and thinking about home and sending money home. So they didn't necessarily take the time with us to say, oh, by the way, you know, our heritage, there is something of our heritage and community that actually begins before the full colonization of Nigeria in 1914. Right? I mean, like there was a time before that. So I guess that was a long way to say I love my parents. It's not their fault, but it wasn't until I was 15 or 16 that I understood that there was a space
Well, this
for
is the
Christianity.
process of growing up. But you are, it seems to me, you're transmitting stories, both about pre-colonial, that was broken, the Great Rupture, and then during colonialism. And could we talk just a little minute about one of your themes, which is women's resistance during the colonial period, and women's resistance in general? George, could we just put on the screen, please? Uh, George, two things, both of colonial. If you want to comment on who this somewhat jolly lady is, and
Yeah,
then
I think you should. You know her very
this is
well,
my
Catherine.
culture. All right.
Yeah,
All right. And then these formidable group. This is Queen Victoria. And when Great Britain had colonized Nigeria. It's too complicated to go into, but there were southern and northern Lagos. This is the stamp that showed British rule. This is Queen Victoria. And these are the women who danced a resistance, right? The Women's War in
yes.
1929,
I just
1930.
love how these women, they kind of, Queen Victoria is looking very secure in that stamp, and the faces of those women are still seem to say, "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" I mean, maybe that's my projection,
I
um,
don't think so.
but I just love that sense of, you know I mean, which is the problem, right, of a kind of this English monarchy, with her back towards the people that they have decided that they would rule and take their resources,
Mm.
and those people looking back at them in a kind of disbelief. Who are these children? Who are these people who just appeared? But and also, of course, the singularity of that stamp versus the multiplicity of the women in the image. But I wish I could even talk about the materials that they're wearing, right? I mean, the feathers, it looks like they have these, um, I don't know if they're fans, but there are certain things that suggest a particular, that these women are very high social strata in the Igbo tradition. Obviously, they're older, um, but they have fans, and I could understand, know those fans are, what those feathers were. Um, but I
Okwui,
love this image.
isn't it
These are my
one?
grandmother's.
Okwui is. Do I have this correct? That an Igbo word for the women's rebellion, the women's war, which was called in the colonial press a riot,
Right.
um, that it's for dance. That
Ogunwanyi. Yes, it's the woman's dance. So it's the woman's war. Um, oh my goodness. But yes, I know this, and this is something that inspired a particular practice that I was doing. Um, but it is, oh goodness. Oh, it's that dance. It's dance. And oh my goodness, Catherine. Oh my goodness, hello, my Ebo is dying. You all, it's something about it's the dance. It's like a dance, that dance and a particular collective practice. There's a word that they're intertwined. Ogumwanyi. Oh goodness. Is there anyone in the chat who will tell us? This is driving me
all right. So in the chat,
crazy.
we're going to have, we're going to have to go to the chat, the questions in just a minute, but there's a couple of other things I'd like to ask.
Yes, you can. I can. Yes, but there is a particular word, Ogunwanyi. So, Wanyi is women. Ogun. Oh goodness, I can't
It's
remember.
all right. It will come.
Catherine.
It will come. We will
I'm
find it. It has
bugged.
not disappeared.
It's
It
not
will
because
be.
it's in all of my. It's in
It,
some of my research.
right. It is like the ancestors. It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
It can be recovered. I
But there is, but it is this language of protest and dance, that it's intertwined or layered, and suggest a kind of sense of that, be the presence, dancing a particular presence, and insistence. So it's, yes, that's in that word. Okay. But
but
continue, Catherine. Oh, that's gonna
but
drive me
there will happen.
crazy. That
And
is
excuse me,
driving me
the
crazy.
sound of construction will go away soon. So, and their weapons were dance, song. Am I
Their
right?
bodies, their
Their body.
bodies, and stones and bricks, and um, but they were shot and killed, by representatives of the colonial government, and the British, government did create, my goodness, what is the word for, there was a hearing and a way to sort of say, well, what happened and how do we address this? So there was the colonial government, did hear it, and there is a record of those, of what happened, and I also have that, beautiful book that is
Yes, and it would
basically a
be.
report of all of these, women speaking about what happened, why they did what they did, um, and what the British government, what the representatives needed to do to change it. So yeah,
But it is. So it's a part of the stories that you choose to transmit,
yes,
both of sorrow, but also of resistance and of
right,
life.
right, right. And
Before
the
we,
fact that the women are, I continue to be just amazed at, you know the role that women have played throughout history in advocating for social change and throwing their bodies in, you know, in front of the cannons, in front of the bombs. They when they have said enough is enough, and they are brilliant strategists and collectivists who who shift the world. So
Yes.
I'm constantly amazed and gratified and thankful.
And I'm sure we will see more of them on the road.
Yes, yes.
It- The road has part one,
We
part two, part three,
Yes,
but
it
so
does.
I
It
hope.
does. It has definitely part two and part three. So
Before,
you're invited.
and I look forward to seeing it, but before we go to the questions, in 2014, you played an important role in Julie Taymor's film of Midsummer's Night's Dream. And you were Hippolyta, and quite appropriately, the Amazonian queen.
Mhm.
And you were about to marry a kind of guy warrior named
Yeah.
Theseus. And you're being told about all the strange convolutions during the night, which is the plot of the play. And then you and Theseus, and I have to say, I think you're smarter than Theseus, but I don't want to look like him. I don't want to look mean. I really don't. But you're talking about the imagination. And he says, well, it belongs to, I mustn't do this. He says it belongs to lunatics, lovers, and poets.
Mm.
And you, the Amazonian queen, are of, from my reading about the imagination, it's rather more collaborative and you're rather more gracious. And before we go to the Q&A, I would be just so pleased if you would read a speech about the imagination from Midsummer Night's Dream, and then we'll go to the Q&A for a few minutes.
Happily, happily. But all the story of the night told over, and all their minds transfigured so together, more witnesseth than fancy's images, and grows to something of great constancy, but howsoever strange and admirable.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think those are wonderful words about your
They're
art.
beautiful. Yes,
Strange and admirable.
admirable. Yeah.
So thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions because we try to stop at high noon. And before
Yes.
we go there, thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you again
Catherine.
for for the opportunity to let us know even more about what you're thinking and doing and feeling. Now, let me see if I can work this. Here's one. Okay. Regarding the image of Queen Victoria, love, where's the chat here? Hold on.
Oh, that's the Q&A, right?
Yeah, yeah. Here's the chat. Oh, the questions are coming. Okay. Skirball says, regarding the image of Queen Victoria, love the description of the women asking Queen Victoria what she's doing and the meaning of her turn back. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about that?
Well, just I mean, you know, it's kind of my father once told this story about how his father, who actually had multiple wives and was living in actually a pre-colonial position, um, had been trained by missionaries, was a nurse in Nigeria, and was really good friends with a local bishop, right, from England. And when my father's father had taken another wife, I think he had taken maybe a fourth wife, and the bishop had my father over and was sort of saying how, was kind of complaining or speaking in wonder about how this, my father's father, who had been, you know, raised in the church, went to church schools, was a nurse, educated in the church, how he could continue to live this heathen life. and my father kind of had to sit there and bear it. But my father told me he remembered thinking that this bishop was so like a child. He didn't understand complexity. He didn't understand how multiple things could happen at once. And it makes me think of so many cultures, you know, and it's they kind of try to bear with the greedy, ravenous sort of childlike quality of the conqueror, right? I don't think they always see the danger. They see like they see the actions of a child that doesn't understand the world. And there's something about even those women looking at Queen Victoria. It just reminds me also of that story my father told, and reminds me of the stories that I hear often. So
Mm,
I don't.
thank you. Um, what were your ways to becoming a multi-dimensional artist, which were writing, playing music, singing, painting? And did college or university make any difference to you? Did going up to New Haven to Yale make any, what kind of a difference?
Well, I think I will say that so I grew up, I had been wanting to write since I was 7. I started to write my ideas of plays when I was 7, because I was also attuned to the fact that I didn't see many people who looked like me in what I was exposed to on television, and I grew up in the Bronx in the 70s, and the 70s and 80s. So we're talking, it's African American, African people, Jewish folks, Italian folks, Irish folks. It is Puerto Rican folks. I said African Americans. It's Vietnamese, Cambodian folks coming. After the brutal the Khmer Rouge and the U.S. and their brutal intervention in that part of Asia. So I was surrounded by just this the a vital world, and you turn on the television, all you see is the Brady Bunch and da 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 la, la, la. So I felt very much like I had to start to make. I wanted to make those stories. I needed those stories, and my mother sometimes would tell us old folk tales, and so that's, I think I started to write, and then I always sang. I was in choruses and church choirs and choruses in schools, but I just felt a real desire to just to keep to make things, to create things that I didn't see. So and I would say that going to Yale as an undergrad was a kind of amazing experience, and that I met a lot of other young artists who were really they were critical thinkers, but also really believed that if they could imagine something, they could project it and make it in the world. And so that was a really useful experience.
Thank you. I think this will be our last question, unfortunately. Um, I'd love to know, and again, I apologize for the sound of the drill. I'd love to know more about your ancestors in the world of dance and art. Whose work, choreographers or dancers or artists, has been important for you in developing your practice?
Well, I know. So I want to be careful about ancestors, right? Because I have folks who are still with me who are
Yeah.
critical to my thinking, and critical to also the process of building work and how I want to build community in the space, right? Like Ralph Lemon, who I have been working with since 2003, uh, is family to me. He's a mentor, but he's a North Star, right? I think the rigor of his practice, the rigor of his investigations, and then the bravery by which he um, makes what he makes. I am, and his promiscuity, his capacity to move through multiple genres is a constant source of inspiration to me, and just his loving, gentle nature, even though some of the work he makes is wild and sometimes a bit frightening. And uh, so he is definitely, he is. I love him, and so working with my husband, uh that's a constant source of inspiration to me. And I grew up, and then it's just like I listened to Sweet Honey and the
Mm,
Rock, listening to that, collective, those freedom songs, you know, got to give it up to Liz LeCompte and the Worcester Group and what they have been doing over the years. Joao Alejo Zawillar at Urban Bushwoman, what she has been building, how they have been navigating and upsurging histories, and also the space of the laboratory even within her company, and all of the incredible women that have come out of that. Nora Chipaumire. I mean, I just um and of course we look to Pina Bausch, we look to, there are so many, how can I name them all?
It's the multiplicity of the world.
Yes, I mean, yeah,
I
yeah.
May I say something about your husband that may surprise?
Yes,
He was once a high school teacher, right?
he was he did, yes, he did. He was a substitute teacher, yes, but they let the substitutes basically teach sometimes, and some, yeah.
Well, and I think we share this, as an enormous believer in teachers and what they can do, that I saw that your husband was at one point engaged in public education.
Yes.
And I thought, at this time, how wonderful. How wonderful
And
is that?
in the Bronx too.
Yes, how wonderful. So, a tip of the hat, if I may, to your husband.
Yes.
But thank you so much again for being here. I have looked forward to this conversation ever since I saw Bronx Gothic in 2017. I hope we can continue it. And can I say to everyone who's watching, again, my apologies for the drill, but think of it as some of the multiplicities of life we don't always love, but cannot stop. But mostly, happiest of holidays in this season to everyone. And can we look forward to the new year? Look forward to the new year by mustering hope, and mustering hope for the land, mustering hope for all of us. And that could we have amongst us all generosity, renewal, and where necessary, to take your word, Okwui, very necessary, the practice of repair. So again, happy, wonderful holidays to everyone. And Okwui, thank you for all that you do. And I look forward to many iterations, well, 3 iterations of the road. And I look forward to seeing you again and again with your extraordinary imagination, your determination to transmit stories that will reduce the unknown and perhaps make us respect the unknowable, but to reduce the unknown in a spirit of vigilance and hope, in the spirit of refreshing our lives, which is, of course, in the spirit of the new year. So thank you for being here again. You're just terrific. So
You are terrific. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
everyone, we're over. The time has come. And again, I thank our guest for the art that is strange and